It was a crisp Tuesday morning when Richard Grayson, the CEO of Grayson Retail, decided it was time to see his empire from the ground up. Dressed in a simple polo shirt and khakis, he walked into one of his flagship stores in downtown Chicago. The store buzzed with activity, customers browsing through racks of clothing, cashiers ringing up purchases, and employees restocking shelves. Richard adjusted his baseball cap, pulled low over his eyes, and took a deep breath. Today he wasn't the boss. Today he was just Rick, a new employee on his first day. The store manager, a woman in her late 30s named Linda, greeted him with a warm smile. "You must be Rick. Welcome to the team. Let me show you around." Richard nodded, playing the part of the eager new hire. As they walked through the store, Linda explained the layout, the daily routines, and the expectations. Richard listened intently, noting the pride in her voice. She clearly cared about the store and its success. His first task was simple: assist customers in the men's clothing section. Richard grabbed a name tag and pinned it to his shirt, feeling a strange sense of anonymity. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. He helped a young man find the perfect suit for a job interview and guided an older gentleman to the shoe department. But then, something unexpected happened. A customer approached him, holding a pair of jeans. "Excuse me, can you tell me if these come in a smaller size?" she asked. Richard glanced at the tag and nodded. "Let me check the stockroom for you." He turned to head to the back but was abruptly stopped by a sharp voice. "Hey, new guy, where do you think you're going?" Richard turned to see a tall, lanky employee with a scowl on his face. His name tag read Jake. Jake crossed his arms and glared at Richard. "You don't just wander off to the stockroom without checking with me first. I'm in charge of inventory, and I don't have time to babysit you." Richard blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected such hostility. "I was just trying to help the customer," he said calmly. "Well, you're not helping anyone by messing up my system," Jake snapped. "Stay out of the stockroom." "Got it?" Richard nodded, biting back a retort. He returned to the customer and apologized, explaining that he couldn't retrieve the jeans. The woman sighed in frustration and left the store. Richard felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. As the day progressed, Richard noticed more cracks in the store's operations. Employees seemed overworked and underappreciated. Breaks were rushed and morale was low. During his lunch break, he overheard a group of employees venting their frustrations. "I've been here for 3 years, and I've never gotten a raise," one said. "And don't even get me started on Jake," another added. "He's been here 6 months and acts like he owns the place." Richard's heart sank. He had always prided himself on running a company that valued its employees. But clearly, there were issues he hadn't been aware of. He made a mental note to address these problems once his undercover mission was over. The afternoon brought another surprising encounter. Richard was organizing a display of sweaters when a young woman approached him. She looked nervous, clutching a piece of paper in her hand. "Excuse me, can you help me with something?" she asked. "Of course," Richard replied with a smile. "What do you need?" The woman hesitated, then handed him the paper. It was a job application. "I've been trying to get hired here for months, but no one will give me a chance. I don't know what I'm doing wrong." Richard studied the application. Her qualifications were solid: retail experience, excellent references. But there was a note scribbled at the bottom. "Overqualified. Not a good fit." He frowned. Who had written this? "Let me see what I can do," he said, tucking the application into his pocket. The woman's face lit up with hope. As the day wore on, Richard's frustration grew. He witnessed Jake berating another employee for a minor mistake and saw customers leaving the store empty-handed due to poor service. By the time his shift ended, he was exhausted, not from the physical labor, but from the weight of what he had discovered. That evening, Richard returned to his office, his mind racing. He knew he had to make changes, but where to start? He pulled out the job application from his pocket and stared at it. This was a company that had lost its way, and it was up to him to steer it back on course. The next morning, Richard called an emergency meeting with his senior leadership team. He shared his experiences from the day before, his voice filled with determination. "We've lost sight of what matters most. Our people. It's time to make some changes." Over the following weeks, Richard implemented a series of reforms. He introduced employee recognition programs, increased wages, and provided more training opportunities. Jake's behavior was addressed, and he was given a final warning to improve his attitude. The young woman whose application Richard had taken was hired and quickly became one of the store's top performers. The transformation wasn't immediate, but slowly, the store began to thrive. Employees smiled more, customers noticed the improved service, and sales increased. Richard made it a point to visit his stores regularly, not as an undercover boss, but as a leader who truly cared about his team. As he stood in the same store months later, watching his employees work together with pride and enthusiasm, Richard felt a sense of fulfillment. He had set out to uncover the truth, and in doing so, he had rediscovered the heart of his company. And that, he realized, was the most valuable lesson of all. Richard's journey was far from over. The changes he had initiated were just the beginning. As the weeks turned into months, he found himself diving deeper into the intricacies of his company, uncovering layers of issues he hadn't anticipated. Each store visit revealed new challenges, but also new opportunities for growth. One afternoon, Richard decided to visit a smaller, struggling store on the outskirts of the city. This location had consistently underperformed, and he was determined to understand why. Dressed once again in his undercover attire, he walked into the store, greeted by the faint smell of stale coffee and the sound of a flickering fluorescent light. The atmosphere was starkly different from the flagship store he had visited before. The shelves were disorganized, and the employees seemed disengaged. Richard introduced himself as Rick to the store manager, a weary-looking man named Greg. Greg's eyes were bloodshot, and his voice carried a tone of resignation. "Welcome to the team, Rick. We're a bit short-staffed today, so you'll have to hit the ground running." Richard nodded, ready to immerse himself in the chaos. His first task was to assist in the shoe department, where a mountain of unsorted boxes awaited him. As he began organizing the mess, he struck up a conversation with a young employee named Maria. She was in her early 20s, with a tired but determined expression. "How long have you been working here?" Richard asked, trying to sound casual. "About a year," Maria replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "It's been tough. We're always understaffed, and the workload is insane. I've been asking for more help, but nothing ever changes." Richard frowned. "Have you talked to the higher-ups about it?" Maria laughed bitterly. "Yeah, right. They don't care about us. We're just numbers to them." Her words struck a chord with Richard. He had always believed his company valued its employees, but Maria's disillusionment painted a different picture. He made a mental note to investigate why this store, in particular, was being neglected. As the day progressed, Richard noticed more signs of systemic issues. The store's inventory system was outdated, leading to frequent stock shortages. Customers grew impatient, and many left without making a purchase. The employees, overworked and underpaid, struggled to keep up with the demands. During his lunch break, Richard overheard a heated conversation between Greg and a district manager over the phone. Greg's voice was strained as he pleaded for additional resources, but the response on the other end was dismissive. "You'll have to make do with what you have," the district manager said before hanging up. Richard's heart sank. He realized that the problems he had uncovered in the flagship store were just the tip of the iceberg. The issues ran deeper, affecting stores across the company. He knew he had to take drastic action. That evening, Richard returned to his office, his mind racing. He called an emergency meeting with his senior leadership team, determined to address the systemic issues head-on. "We've been neglecting our stores, and it's time to take responsibility," he said, his voice firm. "We need to invest in our employees, modernize our systems, and ensure that every store has the resources it needs to succeed." Over the following months, Richard implemented sweeping changes. He allocated additional funding to underperforming stores, hired more staff, and introduced new training programs. He also revamped the inventory system, ensuring that stock levels were accurately tracked and replenished. But the most significant change was in the company's culture. Richard made it a priority to visit every store, not as an undercover boss, but as a leader who genuinely cared about his team. He listened to employees' concerns, celebrated their successes, and made sure they felt valued. One of the most transformative moments came during a visit to the struggling store where Richard had first met Maria. The atmosphere had completely changed. The shelves were well stocked, the employees were smiling, and customers were browsing with enthusiasm. Maria approached Richard with a grin. "You won't believe the difference you've made," she said. "We finally feel like we matter." Richard smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "You've always mattered," he replied. "I'm just sorry it took me so long to see it." As Richard continued his journey, he realized that running a successful company wasn't just about profits and growth. It was about people, about creating an environment where employees felt supported, valued, and empowered. And in doing so, he had not only transformed his company but also rediscovered his own purpose as a leader. The road ahead was still long, and challenges would undoubtedly arise. But Richard was ready to face them, knowing that he had built a foundation of trust and respect that would carry his company forward. And as he stood in the bustling store, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and conversation, he knew that he had made a difference. One employee, one store, one moment at a time. Richard's transformation as a leader was profound, but the journey was far from over. As he continued to visit stores and connect with employees, he began to notice something remarkable. The changes he had implemented were creating a ripple effect. Employees who had once felt invisible were now stepping into leadership roles, taking initiative, and inspiring their colleagues. The company was no longer just a collection of stores. It was becoming a community. One day, Richard received an unexpected invitation. It was from a group of employees at a store in a small town he had never visited. They had heard about his efforts to improve the company and wanted to show him the impact of his changes. Intrigued, Richard accepted the invitation and made the trip. When he arrived, he was greeted by a small but enthusiastic team. The store manager, a woman named Sarah, led him on a tour. The store was modest, but it was clear that the employees took pride in their work. The shelves were meticulously organized, and the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. "We've been following your updates and implementing your ideas," Sarah explained. "It's made a world of difference for us. We feel like we're part of something bigger now." Richard was deeply moved. He spent the day talking with employees, listening to their stories, and learning about their challenges and triumphs. One employee, a young man named Carlos, shared how the new training programs had helped him develop skills he never thought he had. Another, an older woman named Margaret, tearfully thanked Richard for the raise that had allowed her to finally afford her granddaughter's school supplies. As the day drew to a close, Richard gathered the team for a heartfelt thank you. "You've shown me the true power of this company," he said. "It's not about the size of the store or the numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the people. People like you, who give their all every day to make this company what it is." The employees applauded, their faces filled with gratitude and pride. Richard knew then that he had achieved something far greater than he had ever imagined. He had not only transformed the company but had also reignited a sense of purpose and belonging in its people. Back at headquarters, Richard shared the story of his visit with his leadership team. "This is what we're fighting for," he said. "Not just profits, but people. Let's never lose sight of that." The team nodded in agreement, inspired by Richard's passion and commitment. Together, they continued to build on the foundation he had laid, ensuring that every decision was guided by the values of respect, empathy, and integrity. Years later, Richard stood on the stage at the company's annual conference, addressing a room filled with employees from across the country. He looked out at the sea of faces, each one representing a story, a dream, and a contribution to the company's success. "When I started this journey, I thought I was here to fix a company," Richard began. "But what I discovered was that the company was already whole. It was me who needed to change. I needed to learn to listen, to care, and to lead with my heart. And because of that, we've built something truly extraordinary. Not just a successful business, but a family." The room erupted in applause, and Richard felt a surge of emotion. He had come full circle, from an undercover boss uncovering harsh truths to a leader who had transformed not only his company but also himself. As he stepped off the stage, Richard was approached by Maria, the young employee he had met in the struggling store all those years ago. She was now a store manager, her eyes shining with pride. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing in us." Richard smiled, his heart full. "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding me what truly matters." And with that, Richard knew his journey was complete. He had not only saved his company but had also found his purpose. A purpose rooted in the belief that the greatest success comes from lifting others up. And as he walked out of the conference hall, surrounded by the people who had made it all possible, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had made a difference that would last for generations to come. As Richard's story comes to a close, I want to turn the spotlight over to you. What did you think of his journey? Did it inspire you, challenge you, or make you see leadership in a new light? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. Stories like this remind us of the power of empathy, humility, and the impact one person can have when they choose to lead with their heart. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I share inspiring stories, thought-provoking content, and real-life lessons that can help us all grow, both personally and professionally. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. It means the world to me to have you here. And if you know someone who needs to hear the story, share it with them. Let's spread the message that true leadership isn't about titles or power. It's about people. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.